We're actually learning even more about the situation at the chicken processing plants in Mississippi where 700 workers were detained by ICE. Last year, Koch Foods settled a $3.75 million lawsuit for racial discrimination, national origin discrimination, and sexual harassment against its Latinx workers in that very same Morton, Mississippi facility. And I want to show you a little bit of what was alleged in the lawsuit, okay? Supervisors touched and or made sexually suggestive comments to female Hispanic employees, hit Hispanic employees, and charged many of them money for normal everyday work activities. Many workers were reportedly either discharged or subjected to other forms of retaliation when they complained. Now, this suit was brought forward by the EEOC. And as part of the settlement, Koch Foods not only paid out a massive sum to the victims, but also agreed to implement training for employees and set up a 24-hour hotline for reporting discrimination complaints in both English and Spanish. The settlement lasted 3 years, and that means Koch Foods is still under supervision to continue efforts to reduce discrimination in its workplace. And a lot of people, including the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, they are worried that these ICE raids after this settlement will discourage workers from reporting abuses and unsafe work conditions. As labor reporter Mike Elk notes at Payday Report, it may not be a coincidence that the Morton plant was raided. There have been at least 2 other plants, one in Salem, Ohio, and another in Morristown, Tennessee, where ICE raids have followed complaints of worker conditions. Last year, for example, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, fined Freshmark more than $200,000 for 3 separate incidents in which proper safety guards were not in place in its Salem meatpacking plant. A week later, it was raided by ICE.
Definitely not a coincidence.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen 3 times in a row and it's a coincidence, no way. So there are 2 possible explanations. I'm actually hoping that it's the one that is less terrible. So the one that would be most terrible is they're like, oh, people want to complain about workplace harassment, let's go round them all up. I actually don't think that that's the one. I don't know, maybe I'm not, after all this, I might still be naive and there might be terrible people in the Trump administration who think, it's a twofer, we round up undocumented immigrants. And hey, if you complain about sexual harassment that our boss does or we all do or whatever, we're gonna round you up. But again, I think that's less likely. I think the more likely thing is, it's just easy and they're lazy. So they're like, oh, we just did that case with the undocumented immigrants and they were being sexually harassed or they had unsafe work conditions, et cetera. Well, we know they're undocumented immigrants, so we'll call ICE and it's easy. Then they don't have to bother doing research and figuring out who has undocumented immigrants because we already know. And there might also be a directive within the Trump administration. If any government department knows of undocumented immigrants, they must turn it over to ICE. So that's the more likely scenario, but think about how terrible that is anyway. Because that means if you go to seek help from law enforcement in any way, shape, or form that reaches the federal government, they're gonna turn on you and they're gonna ruin your lives.
So the system is already set up in a bad way.
Yeah. So there's 2 components of that. One is, well, Jesus, these people came to you for help and then you buried them, right? So thanks a lot, we really appreciate it. But the second part is actually even worse because now the word on the street is going to be, after seeing these raids over and over again, don't ever complain. If you're getting sexually harassed, assaulted, whatever it might be, unsafe work conditions, suck it up because if you complain to the Trump government, they're gonna deport you and they're gonna ruin your family's life. And so and then the third part of how bad that is that then the employers start to realize that and think, we've got free reign. We can do anything we want to these workers and they can't ever complain because if they do, they get deported. So now God help these workers.
Right. I think the most tragic part of this story was that it was the first day of school in Morton. So could you imagine the level of trauma and PTSD that these children are going to experience for the rest of their lives, going to school, wondering if something terrible is happening to their parents or their loved ones while they're there. And that's if they're actually reunified with their families. The other piece of that is that, let's talk about the economy, right? So the cost of these ICE raids, like they said that-
They worked on this for a year.
Yeah, and that it was, they brought 600 ICE agents to arrest almost 700 people or detain them. So we're not talking about the flights and the travel and the actual operation, but the fact that it cost almost $200 a day per person that they detain. It ends up, I saw another article that said it ends up being $3 million a month, and it ends up being $36 million a year. And we're talking about the numbers for this specific group. What does that do to the actual economy? We're not talking about every other state. We're talking about just this isolated raid. And then when you look at the president of the United States, he would have us believe that migrant workers and asylum seekers are criminals, rapists, drug dealers, they're violent people. But in reality, his own administration said there's an estimated 11 million undocumented people, but yet they bring in 11 billion, but they bring in $12 billion in tax revenue.
I want to show you guys, because I have another note about something you said. You brought up the children, and we talked about them yesterday. So a spokesman for Child Protective Services actually told the Washington Post that, look, we have resources here on the ground. We could have helped with this. There were kids sleeping in, gyms, kids not having anywhere to go after school. We could have helped with this, and saying that they were not contacted before or even after the fact. And here we are 2 days after the fact, and Child Protective Services still weren't contacted by the government in order to help with this, with the situation. Like, at this point, you realize that there are gonna be a lot of kids displaced. And also, we had a little girl on the show yesterday. She's 11 years old, and JR found even more of her begging for her father's release. And I wanna show it because she's 11, and this little girl is so strong. And I think that the level of strength that you can tell that she has, that has to go to show how she's being raised by these people that are being called monsters over and over again. So take a look.
My dad didn't do nothing. He's not a criminal or something. That's what the immigrants took them. Please let him free. I want my dad to be free and everybody else. And those children are crying because of their dad and mom missing. I don't want my dad. No, the Hispanic people are not doing nothing bad. They're not stealing nothing. The immigrants just went inside the company, just get our dads out of there. That's not fair, immigrants. Yeah, just see what I'm doing. I'm crying because of my dad. I have a lot of heart to my dad. A lot of children are crying, and their wife and their husbands are left because the immigrants took them. I can't do nothing but please open the door for the parents.
So she's saying immigrants in place of ICE. She's 11.
Yeah, of course.
So I've seen that 10 times.
But you know what though? I have to, I'm sorry. I get, this is really tragic, but let's just keep it real. We're talking about, again, going back to sociopaths, they're not motivated or inspired by frothy emotional appeal. Even when you look at conservatives, fiscal conservatives, the first thing they say is it's just about economic stability and safety. Yeah. And so the thing is, if the only thing that is standing in the way as an impediment to developing better policies for immigration and asylum seekers is the fiscal aspect, why aren't we talking numbers? And I think that, let's keep it real, it's not just the Trump administration that feels this way about immigrants and asylum seekers. It is people in the Democratic Party who have also said that they are a strain on our economy. We are having a hard time figuring things out for ourselves and our families and our benefits and our needs. So immigrants and asylum seekers are undocumented people. They're taking away from our American dream. And that couldn't be the farthest thing from the truth. So when we present these numbers, such as the fact that the state, local, federal tax ends up being $12 billion of a community that's only 11 billion, it's important to really underscore that when we're having these conversations, especially in the policy development stage.
So let me build off that, because I'm so tired of Democrats being incompetent on this issue. So the undocumented immigrants, as Ashlee Marie pointed out, pay more in taxes than they get out of the system. So for God's sake, say it. Say it every time. Not only that, hold the press accountable. Say that every time a Republican says that they're taking from us, call them a liar, because that's what they're doing. They're lying, or they're mistaken, they're fools, they're idiots, and show them the numbers. Do you know the numbers? If you're in the press, you don't know the numbers, do you? Then do your goddamn job. And then in terms of crime, they keep saying that they're more likely to be criminals. So that's just not true, it's not factual. They commit crime, undocumented immigrants commit crime at half the rate of native-born Americans. So it's not true. If you say it, you're either a fool or a liar. Press, are you ever going to do your job? Democratic Party, are you ever going to do your job against the monsters in the right wing who constantly put out this massive propaganda filled with complete and utter lies?
And follow the money too. The fact of the matter is that they are monetizing the immigration system, system, ICE, all of this, these privatized detention centers. There's money in it. So people hear like, wow, $36 million a year just for this small group. And there's millions more where that came from. And it's only going to continue to grow the more we continue ordering these raids. It's going to then increase the need for private detention centers, which is going to be an opportunity to make money.
Oh, of course, and then they donate back to the Republican politicians and they get money and that circle of corruption continues. Look, it's our job to be fair and bring the facts. So in the case of ICE, they did do a couple of things right here in the midst of the horrors of the overall operation. They let half the folks go so they could take care of the kids. They gave them phones so they can call and have the kids picked up. They didn't let Child Protective Services know, but they did let the school know after the raid. The reason they didn't let anybody know before the raid was because of Donald Trump. What? Well, it turns out because he's such an idiot that if you let the White House know that you're about to do a raid, the moron tweets about it. And so he's ruined a couple of raids, thank God, accidentally. Yeah. So they stopped telling anyone, including the White House, because they're like, he's too stupid to keep a secret. He'll just blabber away on Twitter. And we spent a year on this operation, so we're not gonna tell the White House. They did take some of those precautions, but at the schools, a lot of the kids didn't show up today. Not just the ones from the parents, but also other folks' kids didn't show up because they're scared to death. And the schools say, no, it's okay, we're a safe haven. I love you, but you're not. There is no safe haven. It's the Trump years. You think they won't?
We're still in this country.
You think they won't ambush a school? ICE won't ambush a school? Of course they will.
Especially when you have like Betsy DeVos like at the head of like the Department of Education, and it's just like there is no safe space here.
There have been people arrested and detained while dropping their kids off at school. We've seen that story. Oh, that started happening really soon after Trump became president.
Yeah, just to be clear, they wouldn't be coming for the kids, I hope not.
Yeah.
But they do come after the parents picking up the kids. So that's why the kids don't go.
We saw the video where they busted out the car windows to get to the father, to the driver, while the kids were in the backseat with the mother. So like this stuff is not a game. I see on Twitter, people have been tweeting rights, know your rights. Like, so if they come to your door, you have a right to ask this question, or you can say and do that. But now we're seeing agents quite literally assault those people they're trying to attain.
And last thing, guys, is that the story about how the federal government is targeting anyone that complained about workplace harassment and other issues is why we have sanctuary cities. So if you're wondering, what does that mean? Why? Because the reason the sanctuary cities isn't to say, hey, we will take all the undocumented immigrants and we don't care, we're never gonna prosecute them for anything, including crimes. No. So of course that's right-wing propaganda. The reality is that they exist because they say, look, if there's a crime in our city, we want undocumented immigrants to report it, whether it's done to them, to a family member, or to someone else, or to be a witness. If we say we're gonna turn them into ICE if they cooperate with law enforcement, then no one will cooperate with law enforcement. It is to keep the city safer, and by the way, sanctuary cities, in other fact, have less crime than other parts of America. So, and the reason is because they cooperate with law enforcement. I know Trump's against cooperating with law enforcement in general, right? When it comes to his own business dealings, etc. But the reality is, if you make it a problem and a deterrent for people to work with the government, they will stop doing that completely. And then you have a real crime issue. And then you have real harassment issues, and you have all these issues. The sanctuary city idea is a logical one, not just for the protection of the immigrants, but for the protection of the whole city and the cops. Yeah. Well, hey, you made it this far. You must really like the Young Turks. Thank you, we really appreciate you. Now, another easy way to keep supporting us also helps keep your internet activities and data private, all with a push of the NordVPN app. Head to nordvpn.com/TYT right now for 75% off of your next 3 years.